All right. Yep. Start recording, Isaiah.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 19 of the THP Strength Podcast. Today we have John Evans, CJ Champion, and myself, Isaiah Rivera, discussing a pretty interesting topic. Today we're going to be talking all about the highest jumpers of all time, the highest jumps of all time, vertical jump testing, the difference between elite pro dunkers and high jumpers and all the track and field athletes. And we're going to be discussing everything that has to do with those tests and just jumping high. All right. We're gonna be talking about some freaky things. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm so excited. I don't think I could be more excited about a topic because this is literally maybe the only thing I give a rip about is vertical leap. So recently, this is shout out to Billy Dunkademics, Billy Duran. He really inspired me to make this video because I made a claim. I said high jumpers regularly hit over 50 inches in their event, and I cited the 3D motion analysis data, and I actually and then you take that 3D motion analysis of data and they have other ways to assess your vertical leap off of it. It's very similar to what you'd see on a force plate. And then they're able to take that number and give you what that equates to on a jump and touch or a vertec, because those numbers, even though they should be the same, are not because of slight differences in how they measure it. And we can get into that later. But I said, yeah, on a vertec, they'd easily hit over 50 consistently, like the best in the world, you know? And Billy was like, no way. And we got in this huge debate and it was really dumb. But Billy and I have still trolled each other about it back and forth. And I asked my high jump friends, I was like, hey, do you have any of these videos? And it so happens that I know a lot of good high jumpers. And so Daryl Sullivan sent us a video of him, or he sent me a video at some point of him touching like 12.3 or something. He's a power jumper and he can get to basically his peak vertical in a couple of steps, whereas speed jumpers don't have that luxury. They need a full run up usually. And Ivan Ilya, he sent us, I think that's, or Ilya Ivanyuk, sorry, a high jumper from Russia, 235, which is like 7'8" or something like that. He's 5'10", so that's insane. And that equates to like 51.5 inches if you do an equation where you take 0.57% of their standing height, and then you take that number and you subtract it from what their best high jump is. That'll give you about what their vertical is on a vertec. And he sends me a video and he says, this is a 50-inch vertical. He's just like, sends me it. And it looks like 50 inches. I believe it based on all the high jump data. He's the same height as Steven Selly, and his reach, if you do the math, equates to about what it is what Steven Selly's is. So he doesn't look like he has crazy long arms or anything like that. And he is a freak of nature relative to that numbers that he puts out. And we can talk about the numbers that high jumpers put out compared to what the numbers that that dunkers put out, because I think in basketball we just assume they're the best athletes because it's basketball, and we have this bias. But everyone always is like, why do you care about high jump? And I think that this statement in and of itself, when I was like, yeah, they could easily hit 50, and everyone was like, why aren't there videos? Why aren't there videos? And I'm like, they wouldn't do that. It just doesn't. It's not high jump. They don't really care, and it's high risk. It's a really high risk test for them because hitting 50 inches off a single leg, the forces are absolutely insane. So they're not gonna do it that often. It just doesn't make sense for them to do it. So that sparked this whole conversation about who has the highest vertical, are they legit, are they not legit, and just kind of like going down this rabbit hole, I guess. And my claim was this: high jumpers jump the highest off, a running jump. If you're going to define a vertical leap as a running jump off 1 or 2 feet where you're not flipping like a gymnast, what's the highest you could touch? And if we're going to use the vertec as the standard, even though there's a lot of ways to test it. So yeah, so I guess we can ask you guys, Isaiah, what is your vertical on a vertec?
Are we talking about my standing reach last year or my standing reach this year?
So Isaiah is notorious for the hardest reach of all time. He reaches higher and harder than anyone I've ever seen in my entire life, which is why we always bust people's balls when they're like, oh, I have a 15 vert. We're like, well, did you really reach? But what was your 6'2" in shoes, right? Or 6'1.5" or something like that. And your reach is about 8 feet, right?
So without shoes, I am 6'1.5". And then I've only tested my reach with shoes, but my reach with shoes is 8'1.5", and that's like really just like stretched out, like my arm is starting to hurt, like type of stretched out. So those are my numbers, and then my max touch, my all time PR max touch was 12 feet. That was last year in March, but this last December I touched 11, 11 and a half, and that was after jumping for 2 hours. Like that was at the end of my session. I had cooled down a little bit already because I didn't know we were gonna test. Um, so I'm pretty sure it's higher than 12 feet now. I can't say that because I haven't officially tested it higher than 12 feet. But yeah, so that's
Based on flight times, like, so another way that you can assess vertical leap is flight time. There's tons of ways to assess how high your center of mass displaces, and we're going to get into that because there's different levels of validity to each of those tests. But what's your best flight time on your best vertical leap, and then recently what you've hit?
Yeah. So my highest flight time ever I believe is 59 frames. 59 but
what was that on?
that was on a one-hander.
Okay.
I recently posted that one.
Rim on that? Did you grab the rim on that?
Yes, I did. But it's also one of the dunks I've like least grabbed because it was a soft dunk. Like it was one where I
so kind of,
yeah, like I tapped it with my fingertips.
Okay.
Hold on,
on height check, actually, what's the highest frame you've ever hit?
On a height check, I believe I've done 58 frames.
58 frames. What did you hit on your vertical leap test?
I think it was around that same
58 frames.
Yeah, there was like 58 frames. That's about 0.97 seconds as a point of reference.
So we know that equates to, okay, and then here's another good question because I know you've looked at this. What is some other the number? How many frames did Jordan Kilgannon have on his vertical leap test?
Shoot, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was like 56 or 57 around there.
Okay. What is Guy Oliver? What's he hit?
Guy Oliver, I haven't looked at his actually, but
I think at least his was like 58 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's the frame rate. So it's 58 frames out of it's 60 frames per second. That's how cameras work. For those of you that don't know, they take little pictures. So they take 60 pictures in a second, and you could have a frame rate of 120. You could have a frame rate of 240. And basically, if you were in the air for 240 frames and you're filming at 240 frames per second, then that would tell you that they were in the air for a second.
I know Billy made a YouTube video, and it was about all height checks, and he put everybody's like frame rates in there.
You can pull that up while we're talking about this, but basically, so the reason, another thing to consider when you're looking at that, this is all for comparison, right? And one other thing that you need to consider is that the reason I don't like using the frame rates to measure vertical leap is because, but it does give you, if you're comparing similar types of jumps, it can be useful, but you can't compare a 1 foot jump to a 2 foot jump. You can't compare a running 2 foot jump to a standing 2 foot jump. You can't compare someone that lands on their back to someone that lands on 1 foot versus 2 feet. But generally, it'll get you in the ballpark. But every athlete, it's very good for comparing the same athlete to the same athlete because your jump technique is probably not going to change. And when you're doing max effort jumps, your landing mechanics are not going to change that much. This is just, you're going to pick the best strategy to land for you. Usually it's going to auto regulate. So I think when you're looking at trying to compare like Nick Brizz to Isaiah to CJ, and to Jordan, the reason you see these slight differences is because everyone is going to have a different landing strategy. And if they're bending their knee even 2 to 3 inches more, that's going to make a huge difference compared to like, a 3D motion analysis where everything is very, very tedious and very accurate and precise. And reliable. So keep that in mind that like, we try to measure vertical leap a bunch of different ways, and I'll go over those ways. Basically, the most accurate way you can do it is a force plate. The second most accurate way, the two gold standards would be using 3D motion analysis, which is where you have 2 cameras that are calibrated to what's called a tree. And a tree is like, it's like a metal framed thing that has all the markers, the little white markers on it. And you basically set up the cameras. You don't move the cameras. You don't move the tree. And that's how you calibrate it. So that's basically how you say, hey, video, how high is this person moving their center of mass when we go to look at the person on the film. So if the camera moves 1 inch or the camera moves 2 inches, it will throw off the validity of the test. But that's why we have researchers do the tests and we have them calibrate it and recalibrate it. And we don't touch the cameras and we just leave it running. Usually they get them at 60 frames. Sometimes they get them at 240 frames, or they have infrared where there's like 10 cameras set up, and they measure the markers. They use the infrared cameras to get all the markers in a bunch of different angles, and it really, really gives you super accurate data as long as the tree is in the correct place. So what P3 does is, I don't know if you guys know what that is, but they're like a high level sports science thing. They collect a bunch of data on basketball players. They have a tree, and they do 3D motion analysis with that and infrareds, I think. And then, or maybe they use, I don't know how exactly what they do. I think they use infrared cameras. This is what you see on 2K. When you guys see people do the 2K videos, like what Nick Ross did, and they're wearing the suits, that's what they're doing. They're doing infrared motion analysis, and they have like a whole room dedicated to it and a bunch of infrared cameras, and they're looking at how those joint angles are changing, what the velocities are, the limb lengths. That's why they put the markers on certain bony processes so that they know exactly what the body is doing. And the more markers you have, the more cameras you have, the better cameras you have, the more accurate the data is. So how they get the vertical leap is basically they look at what they have a model estimating for elite high jumpers how much mass is on every limb. So like your upper arm might be 10% of your mass, or your arm might be, each arm might be 13 to 16% of your mass. Each leg might be 25% of your mass. Your torso might be 30% of your mass. Your head might be 10% of your mass. If that hypothetically adds up to 100, I didn't do the math in my head, but that's how. And then they take each of those masses and they look at where they are positioned relative to the ground. So how high each of those masses are. They put the center of mass mark. So for my arm, my upper arm center of mass is here. My forearm center of mass is here. My hand center of mass is here. My head center of mass is here. My torso center of mass is here. This arm center, and they do that for every limb, basically every long bone of the body or every limb. So a hand, a forearm, an upper arm, your head, your torso, both arms, and then your femur, your tibias, and your feet. And they look at where all those center of masses are, and then they calculate how much they weigh. And then what they do is they add up all of those heights of each constituent mass, and they're able to model where this actual center of mass is. Where is the center? How high is each of those masses at takeoff, right? So they look at when your toe is leaving the ground, so that's a big difference, because in vertical leap, we measure your standing height flat-footed. That's already a big difference. So if you wanted to get the Vertec to give you a more accurate measure, you have to go very, very much on the tip of your toe. Like your foot would have to be like this. Fortunately, I have a shoe. So in high jump, we look at toe off. Where is the toe leaving the ground? Where is the center of mass at that point? And then what they do is they look at the very top of the jump, the apex of their jump. Where are all those masses at? And where is the center of mass at that point? So it's very, very, very accurate. I mean, I think a lot of people don't understand how precise and how reliable that measure is. Another way that they do it is force plates. They embed a force plate in the ground. CJ has a question.
Have you ever been around to do the 3D analysis test?
So I have. I would have to brush up on how to do. I've done 2D analysis pretty regularly because there's different softwares that you can use. But basically, you go frame by frame and you estimate where the center of mass is for each of those points. And the software has a model for that individual at their body weight that'll tell you, and it estimates where the center of mass is. So I've done it myself. 2D, 3D analysis we did in grad school a little bit. We had a force plate and all these infrared cameras, and we were able to, we were looking at ACL stress, but we were able to look at the displacement of the center of mass. The force plate gave us objective numbers. Now, here's another thing is how precise are you testing? Because testing at 30 frames per second versus 240 frames per second is very different, right? Like 30 frames per second is not very accurate. But if you're getting 240, like you're getting 240 clips per second of like, you're getting a ton. I'm not trying to swear less. I am trying to swear less. You get a ton of data. So you can look at all that, and some frame rates can be like, for high-speed cameras, can be 500 frames per second, like way higher. Most of the times with high jumpers, they use about 60 frames per second because it's easy to put that on the apron and get the data. And they would do this in the 90s. They do it now. Sometimes they'll do 120 frames per second, but it's a lot of data. With a force plate, you could get 5,000 data, like sections of time. You could split up a second 5,000 different ways. Like imagine a pizza. You cut it, and that pizza represents a second. You could cut it 5,000 different slices. That's what a force plate does. So it's incredibly accurate. It's measuring forces 5,000 times in 3 different directions: vertical, shear. It's measuring the vertical forces, the horizontal forces, and then the X, Y, and Z axis. So it's measuring all of these forces over a period of time. So if your foot is in contact with the ground 350 milliseconds, right? and you're getting 5,000 data points per second, that means over 350 milliseconds, you would get how many data points? I don't even know what that would be. You'd have to do what, like, you do 350 divided. No, wait. How would you? Do you guys know how you do that math? Do you know what I'm saying?
I kind of get it, but
Oh, you do 5,000 divided by. Sorry, you would do 5,000 times 0.35. So you would get 1,750 data points just in one axis, and you would get 1,700 data points in another axis, and you get 1,700 data points in another axis for 1 foot. And then you put the other foot down, and you get those same amounts. So there's a ton of data, and you look at that data, and it tells you objectively, this is you get a curve, you get an impulse curve. They take that curve, and they can estimate your vertical velocity based off your body body weight. So this is very complex stuff, and it's very complex. And if you don't understand biomechanics, you don't know what you don't know if you don't understand this. Meaning, I'm trying to explain this because it's going to set up the context for why this is obviously the most objective way to figure out how we displace our center of mass. So if we really wanted to compare athlete to athlete, we would do 3D motion analysis, and we would doubly get double reliability, I guess, in a sense. I don't know what the word is, but we calibrate a force plate and the 3D motion analysis, and now our data is like incredibly robust, which high jumpers give 3D motion analysis. So now compare that to a vertex, where you walk up to a wall, you put your hand up, you can put it up like this, you can put it up like this, you can put it up like this, you can bend your elbow, and you touch, you get a little mark, and then you do a running jump, and you touch another mark, and the vertex could be sideways. You could have had the actual vertex might not have 12 feet, might not have actually been 12 feet because it was leaning, because it was bent, because one of the tabs was slightly lower. Maybe they didn't reach up the whole way. Maybe one person was slightly on the ball of their feet. Maybe another person was on their heels. People with different foot lengths are going to have different displacements. So it completely throws the reliability of the test relative to a 3D motion analysis out the window. And that is why vertex is not that accurate, but you can get pretty close. You can get like within an inch or two. The standard deviation is probably like, if you do the regression model to predict what a 3D motion analysis is to a vertex, because 3D motion analysis is always going to give you a lower number, but we're used to the vertex, so we go with all those numbers. You can model it and figure out about what their vertex measure is going to be. CJ, you had a question. Go ahead.
Basically, if we never use a vertex and everybody was very used to using the 3D and 2D models or whatever, and since you were talking about it measures when you're coming off of your toes, everything would like change in terms of when we talk about people who have a 50-inch vertical, that's basically like you're an alien at that point. But if we never had a vertex, would it be like 45 inches is basically
40? It would be like 40 inches because so like what we did see is 3D motion analysis has told us Hollis Conway, right? Hollis Conway had a 41-inch vertical displacement of his center of mass and one of the highest vertical velocities ever. Like he had, out of all the high jumpers, he had one of the highest vertical velocities ever. He left the ground at a higher velocity than any high jumper ever. So he was a freak of nature, right? That equated to about a 41-inch vertical. Okay, so for perspective, we have athletes that have done vertical leap tests that are high jumpers or whatever else, or we've looked at the center of mass displacement on these other tests, and we're able to estimate about what so we take a bunch of different athletes, right? We do 3D motion analysis, we do a force plate, and we do vertex, and we do it all at the same time. So it's the same exact jump, right? Does that make sense? So like we have the vertex up, the vertex sitting on the force plate, like P3 does. They come in, they do the running jump off the force plates, and there's infrared cameras all around, and we take all three of those measurements. So it's the same exact jump, but we've measured it 3 different ways, correct? You guys follow what I'm saying? On the vertex, it might be 51, right? On the 3D motion analysis, it's 41. On the force plate, or it's probably like 39. Wow. On the force plate, it's also 39. Just that's off the top of my head about what the regression model is. I don't know what the exact number is, but Thomas Bidenform, a friend of mine, he sent me the research or whatever else. Let me tell you exactly what the model predicted, like what the equation actually was, because I think it is relevant. I don't want to just be semantics here. So his message reads this. It says Jonas' best relative jump and reach was 108 centimeters. His high jump PB was 226, and his center of mass takeoff was approximately 150 centimeters, meaning his center of mass at takeoff, at toe off was 150 centimeters. So you add 108 centimeters to, you subtract his high jump from his center of mass, and that gives you 76 centimeters. So if a 76 centimeter displacement in high jump, using a 3D motion analysis, okay, is equating to about 108 centimeters on a running vertec. That tells you that the conversion factor is about 1.44, meaning you would take whatever your high jump displacement is using 3D motion analysis, and you would basically multiply it by 1.5. It's 1.44 in this scenario. And I've seen this correlated over, and I've seen it on force plates, I've seen it on 3D motion analysis, and I've seen it on vertec, all been put together. So let's even say that we round down. Let's say it's like one. Yeah, so 1 point. We'll use 1 point. We'll use the 1.44. So if we had Hollis Conway's 41-inch vertical and we multiply that by 1.44. So it's 41 times 1.44. You get 59 inches. So let's even round that down. Let's say, okay, well, maybe the test was wrong. Let's give him 1.4 times 41. That's still 57. You know what? Let's go even lower. Let's use 1.35, like for the conversion factor, times his 41-inch vertical on that jump. That's 55 inches. Let's go down to 1.3 times his 41. That's 53. So using the conversion factor that Thomas just made up in his head and saying, well, yeah, for Jonas it's 1.44, assuming that the jumps are very similar on a vertec compared to a high jump. We just took that number, instead of using 1.44 as the conversion factor, we took it all the way down to 1.3. So we really, really said, okay, if everything's screwed up, we're going to say there's a 15% error. That's a ton. That would not be statistically significant whatsoever. That's a massive error. Hollis Conway still has a 53-inch vertical. That's higher than anyone ever. It's not even close. So for perspective, what the point that I'm making is high.
And a height check is even more than a vertec.
So a height check, yeah. So if you're looking at a height check, so if you took a height check and you measured a height check to a vertec, you would see an additional 3 to 4 inches on a height check. It would, the number. So if you took the same exact jump, you took a height check and you did a height check on a force plate in 3D motion analysis. Say you had the conversion factor for that, you might get a 54 on the height check. On a force plate, you're going to get whatever. Let's say it's the same jump. Okay. And let's say that would be like, if we use the conversion factor we just used, so let's say it's like 1.47 or something like that. I don't know what the actual thing is, but I would estimate it's about that. So a 54 on a height check, you divide by 1.47, you get a 37-inch vertical on a force plate. And there's a whole YouTube video that says why is a 60-inch vertical impossible? And Jesus DePino, one of my mentors, is in that video. It's by Science or Wired.com or something, and it has like 6 million views. And they talk about all of why it's impossible. And basically, what he says is, hey, look, on a force plate, getting even like a 24-inch vertical is insane. Like that's super high. That on a vertec, that's like 40 inches. So what I'm like on the same exact jump, that's what they're seeing. They have the force plate, they measure the vertec on the vertec, they get a 40. On the force plate, they get like 26. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, if we know that this really objective measure is way more accurate because of all the reasons that I just listed, what are you going to go with? Someone's vertec measure or their 3D motion analysis and their force plate measure? What would you guys go with?
Well, I gotta look like a professional, so I'm gonna tell everybody I have a 50-inch vertical.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is the problem is that we don't have access to those tools all the time. However, if you do a robust vertec measurement, you keep them flat foot, or actually the best way to do it would be put them on their very tippy toes, have them reach up as high as they can, keep slapping, reaching, stretching, like doing reps of reaches basically on their tippy toes. Where's the reach? And then you have them test. You could get a very reliable measure, and you measured the vertec and you made sure that 12 feet was actually 12 feet and 10 feet was actually 10 feet. You could get a pretty reliable measure that you could then take, use a regression model. They do this all the time in statistics, and tell you what you would get on a force plate and what you would get on 3D motion analysis. So the problem is we do a vertec flat-footed. We don't have them reach up as hard as they can, or consistently we don't have them do a stretch and touch, stretch and touch, stretch and touch. You could elevate your rib cage. Elevating your rib cage, you want to know why Ayo Jamal hit 52, I think? Because I think he elevated his rib cage. Everyone's talking about the scapula, but your ribs can elevate and depress accordingly, right? So if you go,
look
at this. If you elevate your rib cage, you can elevate up even more. So like you change the way you breathe and really reach up, you're gonna see the rib cage move as well. You're gonna see, and the scapula is attached to your rib cage.
That gave me a solid like 1.5 inches.
Yeah, it's very different. No one's talking about this, and it pisses me off. It pisses me off, man. I'm getting triggered.
I went to Billy's video. I'll put it in the show notes. But I only looked at two of the jumps. It was Guy Oliver. I will say Billy's more strict about the measurement than I am, because I measure from the last frame that the toes are on the ground, so like right at toe off. Billy measures it a frame after that, so he measures like when they're already off the ground.
Yeah.
Uh, and then we both measure it when the first touch of the ground again. And then Guy Oliver, he got 59 frames. By my measurements, he was already off the ground a little bit. So how I would have measured it, I would have measured it at 60 frames. And then Jay Clark measured 58 frames. He did a high check on 10-4, getting his head to the rim on 10-4. And by my measurements would have been 59. He measured at 58.
How did Guy Oliver? I mean, he flies. How did he land? Did he land in a similar position as you?
Oh, that's actually one of the things that Billy covers in the video is like the differences in landing. For example, Myri, he got a significantly lower flight time than they did, but they would land like on Jay Clark's, he landed like almost like in a semi squat, like he landed in like a quarter squat. Myri landed, his foot was perfectly straight on the toe, and then one knee was up.
Yeah. And so this goes back to the center of mass conversation. A lot of people don't understand how physics work. So I'm going to explain how physics work. So in high jump, when you get to the top of the bar, what do? You arch your back. Your legs drop underneath the bar. Your head drops underneath the bar. Your hips move up. What? How does that happen? How does that work? Well, because we know when you're in free fall on planet Earth, when everything you do has an equal and opposite reaction. Okay, these are the laws of Newton. Okay, the laws of physics, laws of motion. Okay, Isaiah, yes.
Just before you get into it, Guy Oliver, he landed on one leg pretty straight. The other leg was up in the air as well. So his
that's
was
crazy. So his is insane. His is He probably might have the highest vertical of any dunker, which I would believe because he flies. Like honestly, he's like insane. So if we're looking at physics and how this works, if I'm in flight, okay, and I drop a limb, there has to be a reaction that happens. Everyone thinks it's on the ground. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If I push down on the ground pushes back on me. Well, that's just the only example you were given in high school, but it also applies in flight. If you start cycling your arms like this in the air, okay, something must rotate the other direction. The same amount of mass. Remember I was talking about this percent has a mass, this percent has a mass, this percent has a mass, this percent. My hands have a mass. Okay, your body doesn't, just because you think physics are a certain way versus how they actually are, it doesn't matter what you think actually happens. It matters what actually happens. And what actually happens is when you spin your arms like this at a certain velocity, the same amount of mass must spin the other direction at the same velocity relatively. You have to, you know what I mean? Obviously your arms don't weigh as much as your legs. So if your arms are spinning really, really fast, your legs might spin, or your torso or your body might spin the opposite direction relatively slower because your torso and legs weigh more, right? So just because things have to be equal. That said, when you do a height check, you take off the ground on your tippy toes with your hands above your head. In flight, you drop your hands down. Okay, because the center of mass is not changing its trajectory after you leave the ground, it's going to go like this. You can't cycle your arms and have it travel up. You can't cycle your arms the other way and have it travel down. It's going to travel on an apex because that's how gravity functions on your center of mass. If I drop limbs in space, okay, my center of mass does not move up. It does not move down. It's traveling along its trajectory. But some other limbs must move because the center of mass is in the same spot, right? So what happens? Your torso and your head look as if they move upwards. And you guys are all mind blown right now, but it's physics. It happens in high jump. It happens in diving. It happens in everything that happens in the air when you start moving limbs, okay? So if you take off in this position, unless you're doing a height check with your hands completely above your head, which, by the way, no one does. Why? Because when you drop your hands, let's say 20% of my mass just moved. If this is the center of mass of my elbow and this is the center of mass of my elbow, 20% of my mass just moved about a meter downwards. Well, 20% of your mass is going to move upwards a meter because that's how physics work. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
That's why the Fosbury.
I hate this. You're all so stupid.
Yeah, now Fosbury flop, that's how it works. Like you curve your body around the bar, and then your center mass is staying the same, but you can elevate more of your body above it. And then that's also why a lot of people they'll mention how on certain dunks they can get higher than others. It's because of the dunk. So for example, my highest jumps, the dunk I posted today behind the back, my legs are straight, both my arms are down behind my back. It looks like I get high. A windmill, both my arms are below my body, so it's more similar to a high check. Dunks that don't look as crazy with height between the legs. You got one knee up in front of your body and then the other leg up behind your body. So it's
A lot of your mass is high. A lot of your mass is very high.
Even though this is the name I'm not supposed to speak, but Who Mixtape, they posted a video of
that's what I was thinking. Button, bro.
Will Button did this was a high angle. Like the camera was at a high angle, like above the rim. Will Button did a between the legs with his head above the rim.
That's insane. That's insane. Because think about this, guys. More of his mass is high. If his arms are up and his legs are really, really high in the air, okay, something is going to move downwards, i.e. his head and torso. So because the center of mass travels on the same exact trajectory, if I raise up, if I raise my arms above my head, 20% of my mass is whatever, a meter higher. If my legs, instead of being straight, are in a split position like they are in between the legs, now let's say an additional 25% of my mass is a meter higher. That's 45% of my mass. That's like 45% of my mass. That's like a foot higher, or actually maybe like 2 to 3 feet higher. My head should drop an additional 2 to whatever. Not actually, but this is not the exact math. Let's say, I don't know what it actually be. It'd probably be like 30% of your mass is maybe the center of mass of each of those limbs might move up 12-ish inches. So if you're getting your head to the rim on something like that, that's absolutely insane. Oh, actually, I lied. Your hands are down and in between the legs. So your arms are down. This is why. I was like, that doesn't add up, and that's not right. This is why. Because you're in this position, right? So it's this position, right? Oh, sorry, you guys can't see, but my hands are between my legs. My left leg would be at 90 degrees. My knee on the right leg would be at 90 degrees.
It's similar in height to what you would get on a two-hander.
Yeah, so basically your arms are low,
but your legs are down, and then in between the legs, your legs are up, but your arms are down.
If you really wanted to get in those specifics, the arms are low, right? The arms are relatively low. They're down like they would be in a height check. Your right, whatever the up leg is, that femur is going to be about whatever it would be like. If you looked at the just displacement, it'd probably be this high. So about 12 inches for the right femur. The tibia is down, so it's going to be the exact same. It's vertical with the ground, right? So that one's not going to be higher. That limb's not going to be. Actually, I don't know if that would work because technically, I'm not sure. But the other femur is going to be vertical. So relatively, yeah, this is right. This is right. So anything that's vertical, straight down towards the ground, is going to be where it would be during a height check. But he's lifting up his tibia on the back leg, and he's lifting up his femur on the up leg. So roughly, if your femur weighs 12% of your mass and your tibia weighs 8% of your mass, that's 20% of your mass is going to be about 12 inches higher. So if you can get your head to the rim on that, it's going to be wild. I just did that math in my head. It's not super valid or reliable, but just so you guys have a rough.
So if you ever have to do a height check test, we should do height check tests doing it between the legs.
Here's another good example. Can you imagine if you guys did like yeah, exactly, do a height check with between the legs? Oh, no one's winning. How's that happening? Oh, it's a really low vertical when I do that. Or better yet, if you see like Anthony Hamilton. The reason Anthony Hamilton's dunks look insane is because, one, he has really long arms, right? But when he's doing his like two-hand dunk, no one does a two-hand dunk with their head at the rim. You don't see anyone do that with their hands both up above their head and head at the rim. Like the reason that if you guys remember Will Williams, the guy that went super viral a couple months back, he did like he just did a two-hander, but he like got way up there and cocked it back, and his head was at the rim, and it looked insane. Well, that's because it actually was insane. He was his arms totally above his head.
He has one of my favorite Dunkademics videos.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's just freaky. He didn't even do any like spectacular dunks, but like it just looks freaky, like when he's jumping. Like,
and Billy was like, he didn't even jump that high that day, and we were like, yeah, we know. And it's true. Like he probably didn't jump that high that day. He's just a freak of nature, and like it still looks insane. Yeah. So I'm going into all this because what started our conversation on this was this high jump conversation, and we got into all the validity, we got into the reliability. So if you guys in the show notes at 34 minutes, we start comparing them. All right. What we see is that high jumpers consistently for years have been hitting way higher verticals than any other athlete. And it makes sense because it's a sport that's been around for, I don't know how long, like since the 1900s, we've been doing high jump. Like people have been practicing that event for a very, very long time. And when we look at those measurements and we watch the jump, it looks insane. And if you've ever tried high jump and you're like, oh, I'm going to kill it, I can dunk, and then you kind of suck relative to other people, well, they jump higher than you. I'm sorry. The event, it doesn't bias itself. Yeah, there's rotation and things like that, But if your technique is perfect, and your vertical is crazy high, best case scenario, you're going to clear the bars that other people do. And like with dunkers, if you could get your hips, so in a dunk or in a height check, right, your belly button is about where your center of mass is. So if a dunker could get their belly button to 8 feet, then I would know that they are also hitting. Like, I mean, think about that. Standing height, your center of mass it's about your waistline, about where your belt is. If your arms are down to your side. So if you guys are on a height check, and you could get your belt line basically to 8 feet, how high? What's the highest person you could jump over?
8.
If you're doing a double up and you're not pushing off. Imagine that too. You got to go over 8 feet and you can't push off.
So it's like from your belly button to jump over someone, you got to get your crotch over them, right?
Like it would be like it's about like where your waistline is, like where your belt would be. So your belt to the the bottom of your ball sack.
So it's like 8 inches.
So 8 inches. So you would have to
mass 8 inches above the tallest person that you could clear.
You would need to cleanly, without a push off, jump over someone that's to get the same that whatever else, it'd say your relative same height. You'd have to basically jump over someone that's 7'4" to get your center of mass to the same point high jumpers do. And some high jumpers have bad technique, so they actually displace their center of mass higher than the actual bar is set. They just don't have perfect rotation, or they don't have a certain amount of arching or unarching, or they time it up wrong. So usually they have to jump 3 to 4 centimeters higher than the bar is actually set to clear it. Because it's best case scenario, perfect jump, your center of mass is equal with the height of the bar. So imagine this. Let's add another inch. Let's just give it to the high jumpers here. So you have to basically, to equate to what the world record holder did, you'd have to, let's say you're 6'6", you'd have to get, actually he displaced the center of mass upwards of 248 centimeters on that jump consistently. You have to be able to jump over basically a 7'4" person, right, at 6'6". So cleanly. That means when you jump over Blake Griffin, standing all the way upright, don't put his head down, don't put a ball on his head, don't push off with your hands. You got to cleanly jump over him, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone can do that. I don't know if anyone can do that.
I think the tallest person I could clear with no push off would probably be like 6'8".
6'8". So that would be, what would that put you at? Let's see if the math about adds up. So we say 6'8". We say it's about 6 to 8 inches between. So let's just add 7. That would be +4 + 3, 7'3". So you could get your center of mass up to about 7'3". Now let's see if this math equates as well.
Wait, this is actually pretty cool.
Wait. Let's see. What's your 6 foot what? Let's say 7'4". Huh?
6'2".
6'2". So 6 times 12. Let's see where your center of mass would be. It's about 57% of your standing height. This is how high jumpers do it. How you can get the rough estimate. +2. Okay, divided by 0.57. That's 100. Wait, that's not right. 6 times 12 + 2 divided by 2. No. 70. Sorry, guys. 74 times 2.54 times 0.57. Okay, so your center of mass, that's just standing straight up and down, is 107 centimeters. Okay, I'll put that into inches actually, because it'll be a little bit easier to do this. 2.54. So that's 42 inches. All right, 42 inches is your standing center of mass height. To clear the 7'4" guy or 6'8" guy, we said that you would have to get your center of mass to about 6'4"? Is that what we said? 6'3", 6'4", or 7'4"? I'm sorry, 7'4". 7'3". So this is without any rotation, no high jump mechanics. This is just what he can get his center of mass up to vertically in the air using the same equation that high jumpers use. We just would assume that their center of mass is about equal with the bar. In reality, it's actually higher, but we're just going to give it. We're going to say, hey, look, in reality, if you jump 8 feet, that's 245 centimeters. Or 2.45, you got to get your center of mass at least up to that point. Okay, meaning it's probably higher, but you got to get it at least up to that point. And we're saying, Isaiah, hey, look, what's the highest person you can jump over? Oh, without a push off, 6'8". Okay, you got to get if you want to jump over that 6'8" person, your center of mass at least has to be about, your belt line has to be about 7'4" if you want to jump over a 6'8" guy, right? About 8 inches. So then what we would do is we would take that 7'4" and we'd subtract 42. So 7 times 12 plus 4. Minus 42. What's your vertical?
Like 47.
Oh, it equates to 46. Oh, how did that equation just happen to pop out?
And you know what's really cool, John, is when I was in high school, I high jumped 6'2", and my vertical has gone up around a foot. So I could probably, which equates to the numbers we were saying.
That's what I'm saying is if you had perfect, so you could probably scissor kick over 7 feet off 2 feet if you had perfect technique, because your center of mass has to be even higher in a scissor kick. So if you had a perfect double leg scissor kick, you'd probably get around 7 feet, which is crazy to think about. But everyone's like, so these numbers are not made up. You think I'm just able to estimate these numbers? No, I'm pulling real equations that exist. Okay, that researchers.
That's actually really crazy how accurate that was.
Wasn't that crazy? I just did that off the top of my head. We just did a little, common sense proof. That equation is pulled from Stephen Holmes. He pulled that from a research article. You can look it up on his page. It's 0.57 of your standing height. That's about where your center of mass is. Standard deviation of about 1 inch. And then you add your vertical to that, and that tells you about what you could high jump if you had perfect technique. So we're assuming
how tall of a person you could clear.
Yeah, or how tall of a person you could clear.
Imagine
you would take that equation and you would say if his hair is tickling my balls on this jump, I got to get my belly button about 8 inches higher than that. So you would take you would see how high they'd have to get. You would take their standing height, add their vertical, and that would be where their belly button would be. So you'd have to or where their belt line would be. So you'd estimate how high from your belly button to that point is to see what the person height you could jump over. So CJ, go ahead.
Can we make like a calculator, an online calculator to help people figure out what height they can jump over for prop dunks?
That actually really sick.
You just take, so the equation would be this. You can write this down
on the website, THP Strength.
I'll have to put this on the website. This is a very interesting thing. So for a prop dunk, if you want to jump over someone, this would be off the top of my head based off of this high jump equation and how high you get your center of mass. So you would measure your belt line to your ball sack, which I'm not going to do, but I don't know. What is that actually? What are we going to call that value? We need to call that value something.
The belt line to ball sack value.
Belt line to ball sack. So that's BL to BS.
Bro, we're gonna have a lot of listeners doing weird measurements today.
I know, right? But that's all right. So if you got some big balls, sorry, boy, bro. But anyways, that would be. I mean, that's what you got to do when you jump over someone. Let's say, what do you think that is, roughly? Oh, Isaiah's about to measure it. Isaiah, what is your belt line to ball sack measurement, roughly?
Hold up, give me 1 second.
It's off camera. What's it at?
You guessed perfectly. It was 7 inches.
7 inches. How about that? All right. So let's say roughly 7 inches. So we'll use that. So you would take your height. So you do h, which is your height. All right. Times 0.57. All right. And then you would add your vertical to that. So you put this all in, I guess, parentheses. So you'd add your vertical. So whatever V vertical jump running is. And you would take that whole equation and you would subtract 7 inches, and that would be the highest person that you could jump over. And this is the equation: prop height.
Yeah. And that's like clearing them super cleanly.
Clearing them super cleanly with the arms. That would be clearing them super cleanly with the arms down by your hips. Okay, and your arm and your legs not raised up. That would be your legs relatively straight.
And if you want to know how tall a person
equation, this is how you do it. You would take. We know that this is flipped upside down, but we know that the belt line plus ball sack is 7 inches. So we put the 7 over here. Okay, this is flipped again, but you can see you would take your height times 0.57. That's the height of your center of mass standing. You add your vertical leap to that. That tells you how high you can get your center of mass off the ground. And then you would subtract 7 inches, and that tells you the highest prop you could jump over, about. And it pretty well adds up based on the vertical that we saw and what Isaiah thought. This is how we started. Isaiah said, I think I could jump over a person this high. And I said, okay, let's measure the belt line to ball sack. It's 7 inches. We added 7 inches. We got the perfect measurement. Actually, I think we hit it exactly on the dot because we said 8 inches. I don't know if we used 7 or 8, but that's pretty crazy.
7. We used 7 in the measurement.
47. You could jump over a 6'9" guy on your best day.
Yeah. No put that makes sense because when I was in Riga, like I was jumping like my highest, and I felt confident enough to go over a 7th dude with his head down. Mind you, I put my hand on him, but I feel like I could have cleared him even without the hand. But like, using
that equation, the one I just gave you for high jumpers, we see Stephen Holmes has a 53.5 inch vertical on his best jump ever, about 53 and a half. We see Mutaz Barshim also has a 53 inch vertical. We see that Ilya Ivanchuk on his best jump has about a 51 and a half inch vertical. Guess we can test on a Vertec, 50 inches. Keep in mind, that's without his actual full run up. So again, best way to do this would be using a force plate and 3D motion analysis, because there's less standard deviation. There's less variability in using those measures, but we don't have access to that all the time, right? So we can't exactly use those all the time, but using these equations that we see that are modeled based off doing all 3 of those measurements at the same time on 100 different jumps from 100 different people, we see, hey, look, this is the equation. This is the conversion factor. This is what we consistently see for high jumpers and other people and whatever else, right? Because you're creating the person doesn't even matter. It's just really jump attempts, because the jump attempts are going to give you the model for what that regression is. And then you're able to take more elite athletes and compare it and get whatever those vertical leap measures are. But it's crazy that we're seeing those numbers add up. Like, everyone was like, well, it's not possible. If they could do it, they would do it. And I'm like, no, they wouldn't. If they could do it, they wouldn't do it, because it's not high jump. They're not vertical leap. Vertical leap is not an event. High jump is the event. They're not just going to go test their vertical. Like, a lot of high jumpers in other countries don't even know that's a thing. They don't even care. Most people don't even have access to a vertex, and they're sure as shit not going to bring it out on the track and have them do their full approach and touch the vertex. No one does that. No one even puts it on a basketball court and measures out. I don't know a single high jumper that has ever measured out their 10-step approach and put the vertex on the ground and seen what they could touch on a vertex. No one's ever done that. No one ever does that. One, you'd probably have to move the high jump mat, because your landing is going to be insane, like Ilya Ivanchuk did. If you look at the video that I posted today, you'd have to mark where the takeoff mark is, about where the apex of your jump is. Like, it becomes its own event in and of itself, and it's a lot of work, and it's high risk. So why would a high jumper do that? They're not going to do that. Like Nick Brizz, someone like him, he can get, or power jumpers where they only need 3 or 4 steps and they probably dunk. They probably had a basketball background. It's going to be easier for them. People running 8 meters per second, people like Nick Brizz, you think Nick would have a hard time touching the highest point? Yeah, because he's running super fast, and that's a really hard mark for him to target where it is. Like, you guys, you might travel 3 or 4 feet. Nick Brizz is traveling 15 feet, right, from toe off to touchdown. So there's a lot more precision in that jump to touch a tiny tab at the very tip, right? That's why it's very difficult to get that mark, and why you'd have to practice that as an event, especially with a full run-up. That's why they don't do it.
So I wanna go into like the high jumper, like the high jump side of things a little bit. So would you say that 53 inches is like kind of like the upper echelon of like the high jump verticals around there?
I think like the best high jumpers, the upper echelon of the best high jumpers ever, you would see like 53-ish. Like like using the highest vertical velocities ever, people that would have 53+ inch verticals would be Hollis Conway. I think would have that. I think you would see an old straddler. There was I think it's Valerie Brumell. He would probably have that mark. There's a really short Franklin Jacobs would probably have a 53-inch plus vertical. And that was like in the 60s. Like, that was in the 60s. Like, Valerie Brumell was the 50s and 60s. You would see Stephen Holmes was early 2000s or early 90s, I think, is when he jumped 240. I'm not sure. Mutaz Barsham was 2013. Again, he equates to about 53+. And this is using 3D motion analysis and then converting it to about what the regression model says that they would hit on a vertex using their center of mass displacement. So there is that degree of separation, but that model is very accurate. Like, its standard deviation is going to get you within an inch of what they could do, and they're exceeding 53 inches. So I think those people would have hit those marks. I think Javier Sotomayor might just be right around 5 or 53 inches. I'm trying to think if there's any other guys that are about that. But, I mean, off the top of my head, the shorter guys that clear higher bars, those are the ones that are going to be, or the guys that are just clearing world record marks, those are the ones that are going to have higher verticals, obviously. So It's not a normal, I think you normally, like world class, you look at the top 10 guys probably have 50+ inch verticals in any given year in high jump, basically, right? Roughly. I mean, they're probably between 48 and 52. The best short guys that are hitting that, they're jumping crazy high, like Ilya. Mutaz is only 6'2". People think he's a lot higher. He's not. Again, they're hitting 50+ for sure. Like, any given meet, they're doing that, which is why, again, high jump's super high risk. You're going to jump 50 inches off a single leg. That's, your ground contact time is going to be maybe a third as long. Yeah, that's pretty high risk. So the event's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
So with the elite high jumpers, what are some weight room numbers that you see? Just like the freak, like just some crazy, like, stuff that they do. That's like weight room, and then in terms of speed as well.
So I would say, like, for perspective, you guys think I take a lot of what those high jumpers do, and I look at what they do, and I look at what you guys do, and I'm like, okay, what is more specific? What's not more specific? What makes high jumpers jump better? What makes them jump better? And I compare those numbers sometimes, but most high jumpers do not go crazy heavy in the weight room. The numbers that high jumpers will push up, that consistently they'll hit crazy marks in quarter squat. Some will hit crazy power. Most will hit crazy quarter squats, crazy power cleans. Trying to think of other marks those are probably the two most insane marks you're going to see from high jumpers, right?
That you like regularly, consistently see?
You're going to consistently see really good high jumpers hit insane marks in those two measurements. So you're going to see high jumpers hit well over 600 plus pounds in a quarter squat, well over, and they're going to move it fast. They're going to move it really fast. Most times guys can't put more than 600 pounds on their back, so they just increase the velocity of the movement. You're going to see guys consistently, or you might see half squats over 500. That's pretty regular for high jumpers. You're going to see them half squat over 500. You're going to see, like, they're stronger in those shallower angles. Power jumpers are going to hit higher numbers in deep squat and half squat. Speed jumpers are going to consistently hit higher numbers in shallow movements. You're going to see power clean measures well over consistently. The best guys that are very proficient in the movement, they're usually going to hit between 120K to 150K in that ballpark. It depends on the jumper. Bigger guys will hit bigger power clean numbers. More elastic jumpers tend not to be quite as good unless you add a hang clean or something into it. Like Yannick Clausen hit well over 300 in a hang clean, 300 pounds in a hang clean. He's 70K. He's tiny, maybe less than 70K. He might be like 150 pounds, maybe less. And he's a freak.
For my American guys out there, that's like high 200s, like low 300 range for hang and power cleans.
Yeah, so they're
these are all light. They're extremely light.
They're all going to be the best in the world. Are going to be between the lighter guys are going to have lower numbers. So their relative power clean numbers, I think. Let me just calculate one real quick for you. So let's say that they weigh 65 times 2.2. Let's say they weigh like 68 times 2.2, about 150 pounds, 155 pounds. So 70 times 2.2. Yeah, so about 70 kg. You would take their power clean and you would divide that by their weight to get the relative power clean. Most guys are about 125 to 130. The really elite guys that actually push weight room, that actually train weight room, will hit about 130K. You see 130K divided by 70, that's a 1.85. That's the ratio times body weight that they can do in a power clean or a hang clean. Isaiah, what's your best hang clean or power clean?
They're both at around like 245.
So let's say 245 divided by 2.2. How much do you weigh?
I weigh 175.
Okay, so 245 divided by 175. Yours is 1.4. You're 40%. Your relative strength is 40% lower than a high jumper's is in that specific movement. Now your deep squat. What's your deep squat?
365.
365, and this is correlational data, of course, but it gives you insight to what actually matters. So 365, and what's your body weight again? 175.
175.
So this is ass to grass, long ass limbs. His is 2 times body weight. Most high jumpers could not squat 2 times body weight, ass to grass. Not even close. They wouldn't even come close on that movement. So it kind of, and power cleans are much shallower movements. Everything, like, they're better at plyos, which are shallower movements. They're more elastic movements. You're going to see high jumpers do better on, because generally they have stiffer tendons. Their muscle tendon mechanics are going to favor pulling on those stiff tendons with a lot of force, but doing it with a preload or something else that's going to help them tug on that tendon and get a lot of elastic recoil out of it. That's where they're going to excel in those movements. Quarter squats. They have stiffer tendons, so being able to load those stiff tendons instead of loading up the muscles as much, or relying on a muscle pulling on a softer tendon, they're and creating a long impulse, they're gonna favor that type of movement. So as a high jump coach, your goal should be, hey, I want to increase the cross-sectional area of the really stiff components in the tendon, right? I want to make a lot of these very stiff cross links. I want to make a lot of tendon collagen structure that's going to have a lot of cross links. I want a lot of cross links, and I want to increase the muscle mass, or increase the force capabilities pulling on those tendons, and then you want to increase functionally, or from a basic science point of view, that's your goal. And then you have to add in the coordination, which is you need to make them jump all the time to really use those abilities to the best of your ability. So you take all those things into account, and high jump coaching becomes very complex. It's not like most high jumpers, actually, believe it or not, have terrible hang clean technique, terrible power clean technique. The majority, the ones that really push up the numbers, have good technique, but generally very bad weight room practices, not very good. But on the track, they're very good at plyos and they're very good at actually jumping. And that's what they practice a lot of. So when you're looking at all the best guys, hey, look, 1 foot jumping is different. And that's why if you look at my training and how I write 1 foot jumpers trainings, it changes as you get closer to that specific phase, your competitive phase. Your training is going to change a lot compared to what Isaiah would do. Isaiah rarely needs to do super stiff plyos. It just doesn't make sense for him to do. Maybe there's a benefit for it actually earlier in the year to do high intensity plyos, but they're not that high intense because he's not good at them. So again, it kind of becomes, can you guys hear me? Jordan Canary calling me. Decline. So again, all those things said, those are the marks that they're hitting. Those are kind of how freaky that they are. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to kill plyos. They're going to be insane at plyos, and they're going to be insane at running 1 foot jumps. That's what you're going to see them be really good at. They're not going to be good at deep squats. They're not going to be good at long ground contact time activities. And that's what makes them freaky in their own regard, while also not being, freaky in others. Like they might be faster in 100-meter dash than most dunkers, like bilateral dunkers, but they're not going to be able to do insane stuff over like your 30 meters. Some sprinters might, or some dunkers might have better, if they practice sprinting, might have relatively better 10 or 20 meter splits. But once you get past that point where they start using their stiff tendons, they're going to blow you out of the water. And then if you take this a step further, sprinters, right? We can compare this to sprinters. The best marks you're going to see from sprinters is sprinting. Their weight room numbers are good, but long jumpers, I would say in order of whose power clean and quarter squats are the highest, it would go high jumpers, long jumpers, and then long jumpers, and sprinters would actually be worse than high jumpers at power cleans and quarter squats. And it's like, well, why? Why does that? And plyos. It depends on what plyo. But why is that? Well, because high jumpers have slightly more compliant tendons than sprinters do. So sprinters are even going to do, you get a really stiff plyo, a super short ground contact time. Where does that happen? Upright sprinting. Upright sprinting is the most elastic event you can do. It is the furthest end of the continuum in terms of elasticity. It is so stiff that they're shitty at slow movements. They're not good at slow movements anymore. If they're doing well at them, it's because their nervous systems are so incredibly wired, they can turn on and off muscles and produce so much force. So looking at all those variations and all those things and why I love track and field, it's because honestly, dunking is impressive. I love it. I love the event, but it's different. I think basketball players are incredible athletes, but for different reasons. When I look at high jumpers and I look at, all these other athletes, and people are like, oh, if basketball players did track, they'd be so much better. I'm like, no, because their tendon properties and their muscle properties favor them playing basketball. These track and field athletes are very good at one specific thing they do because their body favors it, right? If you put them on a basketball court, they're not going to be very good. They're good in their own regard at what they do, but that also makes them bad at basketball. So you can't make the assumption of, oh, well, what if we put them on a basketball court or a football field? They would be good at specific skills on the basketball court that are going to use their tendon properties and muscular tendon properties better. You look at James White. James White, perfect example. Was James White an amazing basketball player? He was good, but what was he best at? He was best at running really fast and taking off from really far because he was built like a high jumper. When you look at Nick Brizz is really unique because he moves very differently than most basketball players do. He takes advantage of his elastic properties. He runs on the balls of his feet. He takes off from super fast. He's able to coordinate the ball and dribble and palm the ball and go straight up into a dunk. Most people can't do that with his tendon properties. But is Nick playing in the NBA? No, for whatever reason. We don't know why. I mean, he's a genetic freak, but there's other skills you need to be able to play at that level. You need to be really tall. That's something Nick maybe doesn't have. You need to be able to be shifty. I mean, he does those things really well, and he uses his tendinous properties to his advantage. But maybe that's a whole podcast we could do is why is Nick Brizz not in the NBA? But yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting when you do look at those people that are freaks, that would be freaks in track that actually have made it work in basketball, but maybe they didn't make it to the NBA level for whatever reason. So that's my lecture, my rant. This is one of the most passionate rants I've ever had, maybe one of the most detail information filled podcasts we've ever had. And it was very complex, and I didn't want to water it down for you guys because if I did that, I wouldn't be doing the information justice. And it is complex. I'm sorry. This is why we're good at what we do, is because we understand the complexities of these things. I'm gonna take a breath.
Yeah, you covered a lot, man. I think I learned. I mean, a lot of this was like stuff that I knew, but I know it's gonna be information that's like I think it's always really cool to hear about. Like this is the stuff that I'm interested in. It's just like the upper limits to like the human body and like all how it varies with people, and just like yeah, just being as freaky as possible. Like that's what I love the most.
And it's hard too when I get in debates with people that don't understand everything I just talked about, because it's how can you debate with someone that doesn't know that they're not even aware of all these other things, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can you debate with someone about, how can I debate with you guys about those topics if you don't understand 3D motion analysis, if you don't understand tendons, if you don't understand muscles, if you don't understand those things, how can you debate me on a topic that you don't even know this whole area?
Yeah. The average person doesn't keep up with track and field or know about it, you know? Like guys that are saying like, oh, like these are the freakiest athletes are people who are like sports analysts of like basketball and football and like that type of thing. So
like, and I think like football players, and again, I heard Chidi Anya say this. He said this. He's specifically, I asked him, who's the freakiest athlete? And he said every athlete is freaky, but in their own regard. They're very good. They top out a couple skills. They're able to dedicate all of their effort and time and figure out what those key performance indicators are and top those things out. And they're very good at those things. And then other athletes, you know, they top out a completely different area, but they top it out to the very pinnacle of what a human can do in that specific. It's very hard to be good at everything. To see someone that, like, when you ask me who's the best athlete on the planet, my answer would be, I want the person that I can put on the tennis court and in 15 minutes he can beat me in tennis, and I've been playing tennis for 15 years. Then I put him on the track and he beats everyone on the track. And then I put him on a basketball court and he whoops everyone's ass in basketball. And then I take him and I'm like, hey, can you dunk? And he can dunk off 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 feet. And then I put him on gymnastics and he can do 10 flips and displace a ton of different ways. And then you're like, well, what can't you do? Can you hit a fastball? You put him in front of a pitcher and boom, he blasts a fastball at 85 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour. And you're like, how is this possible? How did you do that? How can you do all these things? How can you dunk from the free throw line and you can have a 50-inch vertical off 2 feet? How's that possible? That's just baffling to me. And if you look generally, there's no one that can do that. Like, who's probably the closest? I know who my answer is. I don't know what you guys think. Two-sport athlete.
No idea.
Sport athlete, actually. Played baseball, played football, did track and field.
I know there's a few like football players. There's like football/baseball players.
Come on, guys. You know the answer to this. One of the completely destroyed his hip. Wow, y'all are absolutely kidding me. All right, I'll give you he had a commercial where he was doing all the different sports that he was doing.
I have no.
Do you know who Bo Jackson is, bro? Do you know who Bo Jackson is?
No, I know his name, but
I don't keep up with sports well enough.
Bo Jackson was incredible at track and field. He was incredible at baseball, and he was incredible at football. He was incredible at track, football, and baseball, which are very different qualities to be good at. And he's an incredible hunter as well as incredible archer. So he's just a freak. He's a freak of nature. Probably the best general overall athlete we've ever seen. Now, you ignore endurance. Again, the one thing I didn't say is you put them in a 5K and see how they do. They're not really going to be elite at that. That's why the decathlon, this is another argument you can make. Well, the decathlon, the best athletes. Well, the decathletes can't shoot a basketball. They can't play elite. They can't play football at the elite level, and they can't play baseball at the elite level or whatever else. I think if you did have a decathlete that could do that, and this is maybe why Ashton Eaton was really incredible. He did all those sports. Then you make a case for why they're the greatest athlete ever. But that's why I appreciate the decathlon, because in terms of output, they can do rotational movements like hitting a ball, like hitting a baseball and slugging it out of the park. They can throw a discus and throw shots super well, and they can throw jabs super well. They could pitch hypothetically incredibly hard, or cricket actually is probably more similar to jab than pitching is, but more maybe like throwing from center field or something like that. And then they can run a 10-1 in the 100, and then they can go high jump 7 feet, and they can long jump 8 meters. Like those, if you really understand biomechanics and you look at what the decathletes are doing, a lot more people should be watching the decathlon than they are watching 100-meter dash, because it's incredible what they're able to do, right? Yeah, so that's my full rant. I'm done. I think we cut it off there. We're past an hour at this point, I think.
Yeah.
Well, an hour or 3 minutes past an hour. Did you guys have any questions I can briefly answer in 10 seconds or less?
You covered everything on my end.
I feel like my question would take some time, so maybe we could save that for another podcast.
What is it, so I can think about it and maybe tell you if it does?
Well, we've been talking about track and field training and how it's so highly developed, and I'm just wondering, why hasn't high quality training transferred over to a sport like basketball?
I think it has in some ways. The reason why it hasn't is because basketball skill training is so intense on the body. So you don't have the luxury to train as intricately as you do for track and field because you can't allot that much physiological effort towards training because it's allotted towards your skill work. So while basketball should be light years ahead because there's so much more money in it, you can't. You cannot apply those training modalities. And this is why Isaiah and I talked about basketball and we were like, if we had basketball players, this is what we would do based on the motor learning research and the training that you're able to do. Combine both of those things. Because really basketball training is motor learning training. You're training motor learning. You're training motor learning, you're training decision making, you're training how your brain coordinates movement, whether it's trying to deceive someone to get around them or whatever else. And you're practicing that basically until your body's just flat out wrecked. And so it's like, hey, if you do that day after day after day, you're going to get really good at doing that. But you completely ignored all the physical capacities that make you a freak athlete unless you're just genetically gifted those. And then you happen to make the NBA. So I think the reason that you don't see it, football is much better. I mean, you think about football is way better about training. Why? Well, because football players play 16 games a season and the rest of the year is dedicated to training. Yeah, you're going to get more athletic. Like they practice a lot, but they spend less time on the field or you're standing around on the field a lot. So it's easier to get the training in.
I wonder how freaky NBA games would be if they were that like few. If there was only 16 like games.
If you had 20 games a year.
About like how high they would be jumping and like how hard they could be going and shit. Like,
I mean, think about the NBA Finals. What's the most entertaining basketball to watch? NCAA tournament and the NBA Finals. Why? Because it's all out. That's when they go all out. Can you imagine if they were fresh going into those? And now that load management has taken a role, you're going to see higher level basketball play towards the end of the season. I genuinely believe that you're going to see higher level basketball play because they can use higher outputs. They maybe can train smarter. They aren't on the court doing stuff all the time. They're actually in the weight room maybe a little more. That's my argument. I'm sure I would have a ton of basketball coaches and strength coaches that would say differently, but I could make a pretty strong argument for that at least for why that's going to be the case. But yeah, I did that answer your question, CJ?
Yeah, totally.
Sweet. Isaiah, send us off. That was me talking for basically 60 minutes. I apologize, guys. I know you don't want to hear what I have to say. You want to hear what Isaiah and CJ have to say, but sorry. Hopefully that was interesting. They thought it was interesting. Maybe you will too.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you tune in again tomorrow. Whoa, next one's actually gonna be episode 20. Big milestone.
Make it a special one.
If you're on iTunes, make sure you give us a 5-star rating, leave a review. Let us know on Instagram if you're listening. And thanks for watching, guys. We appreciate the support. Catch you guys in another day. Take it easy, guys. Good luck with training. Peace.